My mother was born in Germany in a small town called Bublitz. And my father was born in a small shtetl in the Ukraine called Trochenbrot. Things were okay for both my mother in Germany and my father in Poland up until the very beginnings of World War II. My mother would tell me stories about what Berlin was like. Berlin was like the Wild West. Communists and socialists and Nazis would fight each other on the buses, on the bus stops, and you could literally see the laws change regarding Jews, where they could go, what schools they could attend, where they could travel. In 1939, my grandfather had been told in this small town to give up his business, to sign it over, and he wouldn't do it. Within the next week, they came in the middle of the night, the local officials, and arrested him. And luckily, my grandmother took over. She went to the local constabulary, who she knew for 20 years, and basically told them, she's the bookkeeper. She can sign the checks. She'll sign the business over. 2 conditions. You have to let him out tonight, and 2, you have to give us 3 weeks to get out. They said yes. They let him out that night. And within the next 3 weeks, she made arrangements, took a train through Germany, and then through Italy, and took a boat at Brindisi. And my mother, and my future mother, and my grandparents ended up in Shanghai in late 1939. And my mother loved it. My father's older brother, you can see what's already happening, tells my father, you better go to a city called Kovna at the end of Lithuania. There's something going on with another yeshiva, Mir, M-I-R, and they may have made some connection of, it's hard to tell, with some Japanese council to get out. And he tells my father, you have to go. I don't know if it'll work, but if it doesn't, you keep going. You don't come back because it's over. So my father ends up in Kovna, and he makes it, you know. He gets lucky, God smiles. So he ended up in Kobe, Japan, with other yeshiva bochas. By now, the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. Now the Japanese have a treaty with Germany. And one of the clauses of the treaty is that within the sphere of influence of the Japanese, they will consolidate all the Jews. They took their 1,800, 2,000 and moved them into Shanghai, and for the first time created a ghetto for all the Jews in Shanghai. So my father's in Shanghai and my mother's in Shanghai. As it turned out, in the bottom of this very small building was a restaurant. Very small restaurant. I mean, there wasn't much there. But she worked there to make whatever she could. And when my father came, he didn't have any skills. There was nothing he could do except be a mashgiach, which means you watch over the food. And where, of course, does he get a job? In this small restaurant. And my mother is the waitress. And for a week, for a month, 2 months, 2.5 months, they barely nod. God forbid they should talk. Finally walk over to him and go, "Nu? Wildsteppes? You want something?" And that broke the ice, and then they were an item for the rest of Shanghai. So this is in 1942. They get married in September of 1945. They came and landed in San Francisco. My father, of course, came as a rabbinical student, and my mother came as a tourist. And my mother likes water, so she said, well, just like she liked Shanghai. San Francisco is great. It's beautiful. Can we stay here? My father said, I don't know anybody here. We have to go to New York. I'll never make a living here. So they ended up in New York, in Brooklyn in late 1946. And then my mother got pregnant with me, and I was born. I have friends who've been, and relatives who've been to Shanghai. And they said, well, don't you want to go? And I said, you know, I don't, because I have Shanghai in my head. And the Shanghai I have in my head is my direct connection to my parents. And I don't want to see the new Shanghai. I'm afraid it might push out what I have. So instead of that, we're going to go to Greece this summer.